Greetings, humans. Before we resume our violence and injury prevention unit, I just kind of want to explain how today's lesson is going to flow. So I'm going to give you some key words, some key terminology, and go over some specifics as pertaining to victims of bullying and witnesses who see bullying happen. And then we're going to jump into the actual consequences for bullies themselves. For that part of the lesson, we're going to watch a short film, a short YouTube video. Because why explain it when an expert can do that for me in a much better way? Plus, I imagine you guys are tired of my voice, so this gives you a chance to get a new one. All right, so we're going to sort of rotate this way. I'm going to just use the layout model and just scroll down as opposed to presenting large so that it's easier to jump into the video when it's that time. Plus, you get the benefit of my face for longer. All right, so to recap, last class we kind of went over basics for bullying, and essentially we got a definition of bullying. We said it's the repeated use of any power over others to do intentional physical injury or emotional harm. And then we also reviewed the roles that play out in a bullying situation. So we have our victims, who are also referred to as targets. We have bullies who perpetrate the bullying, and we have bystanders who are the people who know about it but don't necessarily do anything about it. Okay. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to jot down and internalize some more key vocabulary specifically related to the consequences of bullying. We're going to review those consequences for victims and bystanders, and then we're going to watch a short video that goes over those consequences for bullies. So as always, when we hit this part of the slide, you guys should be pausing this to either take a photo, screenshot this, or write down the vocabulary. I will be quizzing you again this week. Criminal penalties are any criminal sentence, penalty, fine, or other consequence faced by a perpetrator for their actions, right? So this is when you do something that's considered illegal, right? It is a criminal action to do this. So like physical assault, right? We're talking about violence this unit. Physical assault comes with a mandated minimum sentence. That sentence is a criminal penalty, right? So let's say the sentence is 5 to 10 years. That is the criminal penalty for committing that crime, breaking that law, okay? Now, the second vocabulary word for today is what we call civil penalties, right? Civil penalties are a little bit different. Any financial penalty given to someone by a government agency as punishment for wrongdoing. Okay, the court says the damage is real even if the action isn't illegal, right? So you haven't necessarily committed a crime, but you have done something wrong, and that wrongdoing has harmed another person. So the court says, okay, I'm not going to send you to jail for this, but you do have to pay like a fine or pay money to this person. It's called damages. You have to pay damages to that person because you have done something that has impacted them negatively, and you're responsible for your actions. All right, so it's not that you did something illegal, but it is that you did something wrong. All right, moving right along. The next two slides are going to have us looking at consequences for targets or victims, and we're also going to look at the consequences for bystanders. So when we're thinking about targets, there's short-term and long-term consequences. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm going to give you guys a chance to pause here to copy down or take a photo. But some of the immediate ones that come to mind are the obvious ones, right? It's the initial physical pain or injuries from being beaten by a bully, or the emotional pain or fear that comes along with it, right? These are the more traditional things you see on a day-to-day basis by the person who is being bullied. All right, for long-term consequences, and again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are like permanent injuries or disabilities, maybe disfigurement, scars to your face, broken nose, things like that, right? But it's also like deeper feelings, entering the realm of like depression, hopelessness. It can lead to self-destructive behaviors like drinking or drugs or cutting, those kinds of things. So in the short term, it's what we see, but in the long term is where these consequences can do a lot of damage. Moving right along to consequences for bystanders. So bystanders have this weird kind of role in that their consequences vary depending on the circumstances, far more than the bullies or the targets. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these bullet points. I would suggest that you take a second here to jot these down, catch a screenshot, or take a photo. Short-term consequences, though, that are key. is, again, there's a feeling of helplessness. There's a lot of negative emotion that comes in the role of the bystander. You're not physically in harm's way necessarily, but you do feel bad. Maybe you feel guilty about not doing anything about it, or you're afraid that you're going to be the next target. And sadly, in some cases, one of the short-term consequences is that to avoid becoming the next victim, oftentimes bystanders will jump in and help the bully do the bullying. All right. And again, long-term consequences here are going to be more, not things you see day to day, but more impactful. So that guilt that feels with this becomes like a deep, ongoing feeling. There's also an increased fear or paranoia that they're going to become the next targets, right? They can become desensitized to this, what's going on, meaning that like it no longer impacts them, and they're just it's part of their day, so they just learn to ignore it, much to the detriment of whoever's being bullied. And then there's also like deep rooted feelings of anger, both at the bully and the target. At the bully for being a bully, but at the target for not standing up for themselves. So bystanders play, again, a really unique role, and each situation depends on how they receive or feel the consequences of what's going on. But even though they're not the targets and they're not the bullies, there are very real consequences for bystanders. All right. Now, as we're going to get into the consequences for bullies, we are going to be turning to a legal expert who's going to kind of go over some legal stuff, some non-legal stuff, bullying in general. All right, we're going to watch this video for about 6 minutes or so. And she does an excellent job of covering this. And then once she's done, we'll sort of touch base again moving forward.
I think we're hearing so much about bullying today because we live in a media-rich society. We have YouTube, we have 24-hour cable access, we have Facebook, we have Twitter. So when something happens, it's broadcast around the world instantaneously. A lot of people would think that there's more bullying today than there was when our parents were kids, but really that's not the case. We have such media exposure that we see a lot of bullying that doesn't happen to us or doesn't happen to our friends. But there's just as much bullying that occurred 25 years ago or 50 years ago than occurs today in today's classrooms. Statistics will tell us that most children experience some form of bullying at one time or another, most often between the 6th and the 8th grade. However, that doesn't mean that because so many kids experience bullying that it's okay. We say in the court system that it's no longer boys will be boys, and to bully and do things is looked at and our heads are turned when we see it. Instead, it's something that has to be addressed, and it's something that school systems and other folks are trying actively to prevent. In addition to criminal charges or school suspensions or expulsions, you can actually be sued for bullying and harassment. And if you're sued in a court of law under a civil action, then money damages paid by you and your parents to the person that has been harassed and bullied have been awarded. And those can range from damages for loss of reputation or damage to your reputation to emotional distress. And those damages can run in the millions of dollars. Bullying in the schools is really hard to prevent. I think because, one, there are so many areas in the school that are unstructured. When we're in our English class, that's a pretty structured environment. But between classes or on the athletic field or in the locker room or other places, there is not a lot of structure. And there's a culture in many areas that bullying is okay, or hazing is okay, or harassment is okay because of what we've talked about before with, everybody goes through it, and that's just what happens when you're a kid and it's part of growing up. Some parents might turn a blind eye if their child is a bully or if their child is being bullied. Some parents believe that if their child is the bully, then they're tough and they're able to stand up for themselves and they're being a leader. And if their child is being bullied, the parents don't want to make any waves and they don't want to cause any problems. And they think if they say something about it, then the bullying's just going to get worse. So they're trying to protect their child who's being bullied by not saying anything. And oftentimes, parents are promoting the child who is being a bully because that's the way they act sometimes too. One of In the school systems, there is an obligation for every employee within the school system, whether it's a teacher, a principal, a cook, a secretary, an aide, a bus operator, to report any instance that they see of bullying. So if they see that someone's being bullied or it's reported to them, that person has an obligation or a duty to tell somebody about it. Now, what will happen once that occurs is that there'll be an investigation, and the principal will talk to the people who are involved. They'll probably talk to me if I'm the one who made a complaint. They'll talk to other people who may have been around and who might have seen something, and they'll talk to the person who's been bullied, who's being the bully too, and they'll ask that person if this is happening. A couple things that will happen in the school system when there is a complaint made is that everybody will do everything they can to keep it confidential. Now, I would be lying to you if I told you it would be 100% confidential all the time and that no one would ever know who told. But at some point, someone is going to have to confront the bully, and that person is the principal. And it might be, if it happened to you, then they're going to say, it was reported to us that on the bus you hit Kim in the head. Did that happen? And even if you don't report it and a teacher sees it or a bus operator sees it, that bully may very likely think it's you that reported it anyway. So you're better off on your own going forward, reporting what has happened to someone that you trust, someone that you know will do something about it to make the bullying stop. There are all kinds of things that the school systems can do to make sure that bullying doesn't happen again. And that's their job, not just to stop the bullying, but to make sure that the bullying doesn't happen after it's been told. If I were to ask you to tell me what you got for your birthday 3 years ago, you probably couldn't remember that. But if I were to ask you to tell me about a time when you were bullied, you would remember it just like yesterday. And it could be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And all those memories would come flooding back to you. And you would be in that room again as a scared 12-year-old young girl, and you would have those same experiences even today. You might even feel that way if you saw that person walk into the room today.
All right, so we just watched that video, and We've been answering some questions as we've gone along. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just get a preview for the next couple of lessons. But before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that on top of the Ed puzzle, there will be a short sort of exit ticket posted to Google Classroom. This particular one is going to ask you to sort of basically do like a PSA, but like a written one, right? It's just basically you laying out to people, like if you had to like post something on a wall somewhere in the school that people could see, like what would you say? Like covering basically the consequences of bullying, as well as with some strategies of how to prevent it. So that will be up on Google Classroom. All right, moving forward, the next lesson is going to be a quiz on bullying. Study your vocabulary, go over the realistic situations. It's going to be kind of similar to the last quiz. Thursday, we're going to shift our focus from in-person bullying to cyberbullying. And we're going to think about strategies and ways to sort of prevent that as well. And then the last lesson on bullying is going to focus specifically on bullying within groups, which is known as hazing. And that will be on Monday. And then following that, there will be another quiz on Wednesday the 8th. So yeah, that's pretty much a look ahead of what we're doing. And once again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm live streaming during the time that you guys are supposed to have me, so pretty much 11 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And office hours are on Wednesdays afternoon. Feel free to hit me up there, Google Hangouts, email me, call me, whatever you guys need. All right. Thanks for listening, and good luck with the assignment.